So there's a particular feeling that can be a little hard to describe. On paper, everything's fine. The organization is running, the team is even delivering, and the partnership exists, and the system hasn't failed. Yet, everything feels fragile. Not broken and not obviously unstable, just a little tight, as if one small disruption could cause more damage than it should. People who feel this often question themselves. Maybe I'm just being anxious, or maybe I'm overthinking. Things are working, so why do I feel so uneasy? But that unease is rarely imaginary. It's often diagnostic. So here's the uncomfortable insight. Stability is not the same as health. And many systems that appear stable are quietly relying on something that they don't acknowledge or protect. That something is relational labor. Invisible work done by people to keep things from falling apart. Relational labor doesn't show up on dashboards. It looks like someone smoothing tension after a meeting, or someone translating expectations between teams, or someone absorbing frustration so that others can keep moving, or someone just handling it so that nothing escalates. This work is rarely formalized. It's assumed. In many systems, this labor is what makes everything work, and that's precisely the problem. When systems depend on invisible relational labor, they become fragile without looking unstable. They hold, but only as long as certain people keep compensating. This is what latent trust overload looks like. Trust is being asked to carry more weight than it was designed to bear, and is doing so quietly. From the outside, everything looks fine, but internally, the system has no slack, no redundancy, no way to absorb shock if one person burns out, leaves, or stops compensating. This is why breakdowns often feel sudden. It's not because they are sudden, but because the strain was hidden. Leaders often miss this, not because they don't care, but really actually it's because the system is functioning, the metrics are being met, the deadlines are being hit, no one is openly complaining. So the assumption is everything's healthy. But health is not the absence of failure. Health includes resilience, the ability to absorb disruption without collapsing. Now, here's a pattern that shows up repeatedly. A system grows, pressure increases, expectations multiply, and instead of strengthening structure, the system leans harder on trust, on goodwill, on people stepping up, on unspoken understanding. Now, at first, this feels efficient. Over time, the same people carry more and more load. They become the load bearing without being named as such. And because the system depends on them, it also can't really see them clearly. This is where fragility sets in, not because people are unreliable, but because the system has mistaken compensation for capacity. In cross-cultural contexts, this is even harder to see. Relational labor often includes cultural translation, expectation management, softening misunderstandings before they surface, and protecting one side from the other's missteps. Now, this work is essential and almost never recognized. So when something finally breaks, the story often becomes personal. That person failed, or they weren't committed, or they dropped the ball. But the ball was never theirs to carry. This is why fragility often feels moralized after the fact, because systems are uncomfortable admitting that they relied on invisible labor instead of building real support. So here's another unsettling truth. People who do relational labor often do it because they care. They want things to work. They don't want conflict. They don't want to slow things down. And systems reward that with care right up until they exhaust it. Now, this creates a dangerous illusion. As long as the system works, no one asks what it's costing. That keeps happening until the cost can no longer be absorbed. And this is why stability can coexist with anxiety, and why leaders sense tension even when the results look good. why founders feel brittle success, and why teams feel one disagreement away from fracture. The system's not broken. It's just overloaded. If you're in a leadership position, this is a difficult thing to face because it means that you have to ask questions that don't have immediate answers. Questions like, who is holding this together? Or what happens if they stop? And what work is being done that no one is allowed to name? These questions slow things down. They surface discomfort. They challenge the story of efficiency. But ignoring these questions doesn't preserve stability. It just postpones collapse. So here's the diagnostic shift that I want to offer here. When something feels fragile, even though it's working, don't ask, how do we optimize this? Instead, ask, what invisible labor is making this possible, and is it sustainable? That question changes the field. What we're doing with that question is we move attention away from output and toward load, away from performance and towards structure. Healthy systems do not depend on unacknowledged heroics. They distribute responsibility. They build slack. They allow trust to rest instead of constantly carrying. Now, this is not about eliminating relational labor. That work will always exist and it needs to be done. Instead, it's about recognizing it before it becomes a single point of failure. If this video resonates, it's likely because you're already sensing the strain. It's not a crisis, but as a quiet tightness. That tightness is not a weakness. It's information. Paying attention to it is often the first step toward building something that doesn't just work, but can last.